The great hall of the Zirean Empire was silent except for the faint hum of the energy shields that lined its walls. Tall pillars shaped like twisted metal trees reached high into the ceiling, glowing with a soft blue light. Soldiers in dark armor stood at both sides, holding long plasma spears. In the middle of the hall, a single human stood, his wrists bound by glowing cuffs. His name was Daniel Rains, a soldier from Earth who had been captured during the last battle. Every alien eye was on him, but 3 pairs of eyes burned brighter than the rest. The 3 daughters of the Zirean King stood together on a raised platform, looking down at him as if he was some strange animal from a distant world. The first, Lyra, had emerald skin and hair black as night. The second, Selene, had deep blue skin with silver streaks in her long hair. The third, Vera, had amethyst-colored skin and eyes like molten gold. They were beautiful, graceful, and feared across the galaxy, but in that moment, they were amused. "Is this the one who fought our soldiers?" Lyra's voice dripped with disbelief as she tilted her head. "He looks small," Selene added, her silver eyes narrowing as she smiled faintly. Vera chuckled softly. "No wonder he lost. I could snap him in half with one hand." There. Laughter echoed through the hall. Daniel didn't move, didn't answer. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, watching them with calm eyes. His armor was torn, his face smeared with dust, but there was no fear in his expression. That only made the sisters more curious. The king entered the hall, his steps heavy on the metal floor. He was a towering figure in golden armor, his crown like a ring of burning light around his head. Everyone bowed, even the sisters, though their eyes still darted toward the human. The king stopped in front of Daniel, his gaze sharp and unblinking. "You are the human who destroyed my forward outpost," the king said. Daniel met his gaze. "Your soldiers attacked first." Gasps rippled through the court. Few dared to speak so directly to the king. The sisters exchanged glances. This was not the trembling prisoner they expected. The king studied Daniel for a long moment before stepping back. "You fought well," the king said at last. "Even in defeat, you took down more than a dozen of my warriors. That kind of strength is rare," Lyra frowned. "Father, he is still a human. They are dangerous animals," Selene smirked. "Yes, but they break easily." Vera leaned forward. "Let me duel him. It will be over in seconds." The king raised his hand and they fell silent. "Perhaps you speak too quickly, my daughters. This human has shown bravery. He stood against an army without running. And yet you mock him." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the sisters. "Mocking is easier than fighting," he said. The court stirred again. A faint smile tugged at the king's lips. "You have courage. I value that. But courage alone does not decide your fate here." 2 guards stepped forward, but the king motioned for them to wait. He turned toward his daughters. "If you think him weak, perhaps you should test him, but not in the arena." Lyra tilted her head. "Then where?" The king's voice deepened. "In life itself." The sisters looked confused. Daniel stayed still, his mind racing. He had no idea what the king meant, but he could feel the room tense around him. "You will serve me," the king said to Daniel. "Not as a slave, not as a soldier. You will stand beside my daughters, protect them, live with them, and prove if your kind is truly as weak as they believe." The sisters' faces shifted surprise, disbelief, and a trace of anger. Selene's voice rose. "You cannot be serious." Vera hissed. "He is not one of us." The king's eyes blazed. "And yet, he will be bound to you by my decree. If he survives, perhaps you will learn respect. If you do not, well, then the matter is settled." The court whispered furiously. Daniel's heart pounded. This was no simple order. This was a challenge, one that could decide his life. The king stepped back, his voice echoing through the hall. "You 3 mocked the human. Now you will live with him, and one of you will marry him." The sisters froze, their eyes wide. The sound of their earlier laughter was gone, replaced by stunned silence. Daniel didn't smile, didn't speak, but deep inside, he knew the war he had entered was no longer fought with weapons. It had just turned into something far more dangerous. Asterisk. Doors to the great hall opened, and the sound of heavy boots followed Daniel as he was escorted down the long corridors of the royal palace. 2 Zirean guards walked on each side of him, their armor gleaming in the pale green light from the wall panels. His cuffs had been removed, but the guards' hands rested on their weapons at all times. Daniel kept his head high. He could feel the eyes of servants and courtiers following him as they whispered among themselves. A human walking freely inside the Zirean palace was rare. A human chosen to live with the royal daughters, unheard of. The corridors finally led to a vast living chamber. The doors slid open to reveal a high-ceilinged hall filled with soft glowing crystals, streams of shimmering water running through carved channels in the floor, and cushioned seating areas made of rich alien fabrics. At the far end of the room stood the 3 sisters. Lyra was leaning against a crystal pillar, arms crossed, her emerald eyes locked on Daniel with an unreadable expression. Selene sat on a curved seat, one leg draped over the other, idly tapping her fingers against the armrest. Vera stood closest to him, her golden eyes watching him like a predator sizing up prey. "So," Lyra said at last, her voice cool. "The human arrives." Daniel didn't respond right away. He looked around, taking in the strange beauty of the place. "It's different from the rest of your palace," he said finally. Selene raised an eyebrow. "Different." "Less like a fortress," Daniel replied. "More like a home." Vera smirked. "Do not think that makes you welcome here." The tension between them was thick. Daniel had faced soldiers, beasts, and battlefield chaos, but the way the sisters studied him was unlike any opponent. They weren't looking for weakness in his armor. They were looking for weakness in him. Lyra pushed away from the pillar. "Father may have forced this arrangement, but it does not mean we accept you. You will stay in the guest quarters. Speak only when spoken to, and do not mistake this for friendship." Daniel met her eyes. "I'm not here to make friends." Selene tilted her head, intrigued. "Then why are you here?" He shrugged slightly. "To survive, same as anyone." For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Vera stepped closer, close enough that Daniel could see the faint, glowing lines that traced her skin, natural patterns that shimmered when she moved. "Survive?" she said quietly. "We are not your battlefield, human. We are your test. Fail, and you won't survive long enough to regret it." Daniel held her gaze. "Then I'll pass your test." Selene's lips curved into a small smile. The first he'd seen from her that wasn't mocking. "We'll see." Later, Daniel was shown to his quarters. The room was larger than any space he'd ever had to himself, with a bed that seemed to float above the floor, walls lined with translucent panels that shifted colors like the surface of an ocean, and a balcony that looked out over the sprawling city of Zirea. He stood there for a long time, watching the alien skyline. Tall spires pierced the clouds, glowing transport pods zipped through the air, and the hum of the city was like a constant heartbeat. He thought about the king's words. Live with them. Protect them. Marry one of them. It was absurd, but he knew enough about power to understand this was more than a marriage order. It was a test of strength, control, and survival in a place where one wrong move could end his life. That night, there was a knock on his door. When he opened it, Selene stood there, arms folded. "We are going to the council chamber tomorrow," she said. "Father wants you there. Do not speak unless you are spoken to." Daniel nodded. "Understood." She lingered for a moment, studying him. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" he asked. "A frightened man," she said, turning away. "You're not. That could be dangerous." The next day, the council chamber was a place of high stakes. Dozens of alien leaders sat in a circular hall, speaking in low voices. The sisters walked in ahead of him, their presence commanding attention. Daniel followed, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. One council member, a tall alien with silver scales, narrowed his eyes. "Why is a human here?" The king's voice cut through the room. "Because he is bound to my bloodline now. And anyone who questions him, questions me." The silence that followed was cold and heavy. Daniel realized something in that moment. The king's decision had not just been a punishment for his daughters. It was a political move. And whatever game was being played, he was now a piece on the board. The council meeting ended with the sound of the king's voice echoing through the chamber. Daniel followed the sisters out, his steps steady even under the weight of dozens of alien eyes. He could feel their stares like heat on his back, some full of curiosity, others full of open hostility. Once outside, the sisters walked ahead, speaking in low voices. Lyra glanced over her shoulder at him. "You kept your mouth shut. That was wise." Daniel didn't answer. He knew better than to think. She was giving a compliment. They walked through the long corridors of the palace until they reached the training grounds. The air here smelled of metal and scorched energy cells. Tall walls surrounded an open space covered in smooth black tiles, each tile etched with glowing lines that pulsed with light. Alien soldiers trained here with heavy weapons, their movements precise and brutal. The moment Daniel stepped inside, the training stopped. Every soldier turned to look at him. He stood still, his eyes moving slowly from one face to another. Vera smiled, but it was the kind of smile that promised trouble. "Father wants you tested," she said. "And I think the training ground is the perfect place." Daniel kept his voice calm. "Tested how?" "With combat," Lyra said. "We want to see what you can really do without your human army around you." Selene stepped forward, her silver eyes glinting. "You will fight one of our warriors. If you survive, maybe you deserve to stay in the palace." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And if I don't?" Vera's voice was low and sharp. "Then your stay will be very short." A tall alien warrior stepped forward. His armor was black and gold, his arms thick with muscle, and his face marked with silver battle lines. He carried a long spear tipped with a blade that glowed faintly blue. Daniel looked at the weapon, then at his own empty hands. "Any chance I get something to fight with?" Selene shrugged. "If you're as strong as Father thinks, you don't need one." The warrior attacked without warning. His spear swung in a sharp arc toward Daniel's head. Daniel dropped low, feeling the blade slice the air above him. He rolled to the side, came up to his feet, and stepped in close before the spear could swing again. His fist slammed into the warrior's side, the impact rattling through armor. The warrior grunted, stepping back, but he didn't fall. He thrust the spear forward, forcing Daniel to twist and grab the shaft. For a moment, they struggled, the glowing weapon humming between them. Daniel used the warrior's momentum, yanking hard and spinning to throw him off balance. The warrior hit the ground with a crash that made the tiles underfoot tremble. The training grounds went silent. Daniel didn't press the attack. He stepped back, letting the warrior get up. His breathing was steady, his eyes locked on the man in front of him. The warrior picked up his spear again, but this time, his stance was different, cautious. From the edge of the ring, Selene leaned closer to her sisters. "He's faster than he looks." Lyra's expression was unreadable. "He's not just fast, he's smart." Vera's eyes narrowed. "We'll see how long that lasts." The warrior lunged again, the spear's glowing blade slicing toward Daniel's chest. Daniel sidestepped, grabbed the shaft with both hands, and drove his knee up into the warrior's stomach. The impact knocked the breath from him. In the same motion, Daniel wrenched the spear free and spun it in his hands. Gasps rippled through the soldiers watching. A human, standing in the Zirean training ground, holding a weapon meant for their warriors. It was something no one expected to see. Daniel rested the butt of the spear on the ground. "Do we keep going?" he asked quietly. "Or is the test over?" The warrior's eyes met his. Slowly, he nodded and stepped back. The fight was done. The sisters stood silent for a long moment. Then Lyra spoke. "Maybe you're not as weak as I thought." Celine smiled faintly. Maybe Father knew what he was doing after all. Vera's golden eyes narrowed. "Or maybe you just got lucky." Daniel set the spear back on the rack. "Luck doesn't last through 2 fights. If you want to test me again, I'll be here." As they left the training ground, Daniel could feel the shift in the air. The soldiers were no longer looking at him like prey. They were looking at him like something they couldn't yet understand. And that, he knew, could be more dangerous than open hatred. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm. Daniel kept his distance from the sisters, and they kept theirs from him. Meals were taken in the grand dining hall, always under the watchful eyes of guards and servants. Words between them were brief, polite, but never warm. The palace was vast, and Daniel learned its paths quickly. He noticed how soldiers moved in patterns, how servants hurried through certain doors, and how whispers grew louder when his name passed among the courtiers. He was no longer just a prisoner, he was part of something larger. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the city, Daniel stood alone on the balcony of his quarters. The alien skyline shimmered under silver light. Behind him, the soft hiss of the door made him turn. Celine stepped inside, her silver eyes reflecting the moonlight. "You should be careful tomorrow," she said without greeting. Daniel's brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because Father invited the outer council," she said. "Some of them hate humans more than they hate our enemies. They will try to humiliate you." Daniel leaned against the balcony rail. "Why warn me? I thought you wanted me gone." Celine walked closer, her steps silent. "I do," she said simply. "But not like that. If you're going to fail, it should be because you truly can't stand here, not because of a trap." He studied her for a moment. "Then tell me what kind of trap." She hesitated, glancing toward the door as if afraid of being overheard. "They will bait you, push you to anger. If you lose control in front of them, Father will have reason to send you away or worse." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then I'll give them nothing to use." Celine's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good, but remember silence can be as dangerous as words in that room." The next day, the outer council gathered in a tall round chamber, lined with glowing banners. Representatives from far-off worlds stood in groups, their voices low. The king sat on his throne, the 3 sisters at his side. Daniel stood a few steps behind them, as instructed. A counselor with silver-plated horns spoke first, his tone sharp. "Your Majesty, why keep a human in your court? Their kind has brought nothing but chaos to the galaxy." The king's voice was calm. "This one has proven his strength and loyalty." "Loyalty?" another counselor sneered. "Or desperation to save his own life?" The words were meant to sting. Daniel kept his expression neutral. A tall, thin alien with glass-like skin stepped forward. "If the human is so capable, let him answer a simple question. Why should we trust a race that destroys more than it builds?" The king glanced at Daniel. "Speak." Daniel's eyes swept the room. "Because you've only seen us in war. That's like judging a blade only by the blood on it. You never see the hand that forges it, the work it does before it's drawn." A murmur spread through the council chamber. Some looked unimpressed, others thoughtful. The horned counselor leaned forward. "And yet your blade has cut many worlds." Daniel's voice stayed even. "So has yours. The difference is, we remember the cost." The silence that followed was heavy. The king's lips twitched into something close to a smile. After the council was dismissed, the sisters walked with Daniel back through the palace halls. Lyra was the first to speak. "You surprised them." Daniel glanced at her. "Wasn't that the point?" Vera's golden eyes stayed fixed on him. "Careful, human. The more you surprise them, the more they will want to see you fall." That night, Daniel returned to his quarters, but he couldn't sleep. The warning Selene had given him still echoed in his mind. She had tried to help him, but her reasons were still unclear. Was it strategy? Or something else? As he stared out at the twin moons, he knew one thing for certain: his place in the palace was no longer just survival. He was in the middle of a game he didn't fully understand. And every player at the table was dangerous. The following morning, Daniel was woken by the sound of boots in the corridor. 2 guards entered without knocking, their expressions flat. "The king summons you," one of them said. Daniel dressed quickly, strapping on the clean set of armor that had been given to him days before. He followed the guards through winding hallways until they reached the open courtyard at the heart of the palace. The space was ringed by tall walls and filled with alien banners that swayed in the wind. Hundreds of people stood in a wide circle: nobles, soldiers, and servants alike. At the far end sat the king, his throne placed beneath the shadow of a towering crystal arch. The 3 sisters stood on either side of him, their eyes fixed on Daniel. When Daniel stepped into the center of the courtyard, a murmur rippled through the crowd. The king's voice carried over them. "My council has seen your words. Now they will see your skill. You will prove today whether a human can stand in my court as more than a curiosity." Lyra's voice was calm but cutting. "You'll be fighting one of our champion warriors." Vera added with a smirk, "Try not to die too quickly." Selene's gaze lingered on him, unreadable. From the far side of the courtyard, a massive warrior approached. His armor was dark and jagged, his arms covered in glowing scars that pulsed with faint blue light. He carried no weapon at first, but then, as he stepped into the sunlight, 2 curved blades slid from his gauntlets with a metallic hiss. Daniel flexed his hands, loosening his shoulders. He had no weapons yet. The king gestured toward a rack of alien arms near the wall. "Choose." Daniel walked over, scanning the weapons. Heavy hammers, energy swords, and strange bladed poles glowed faintly under the sunlight. He picked up a short plasma staff, its weight balanced, its ends glowing with crackling energy. The fight began without ceremony. The champion lunged forward, both blades slicing toward Daniel's chest. Daniel spun the staff, blocking the first strike and sidestepping the second. The heat from the energy blades burned close to his skin. The champion struck again, faster this time. Daniel blocked and parried, letting the staff absorb the blows. The sound of energy meeting energy cracked through the courtyard. Like lightning, the crowd shouted and gasped as the pace quickened. Daniel ducked low, sweeping the staff at the champion's legs, but the alien jumped back, countering with a downward slash. Daniel blocked again, the force of the strike rattling his arms. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "He's still standing." Vera crossed her arms. "For now." The champion pressed forward, each strike heavier than the last. Daniel's breathing grew faster, but his movements stayed controlled. He waited, watching the rhythm, feeling the slight pause between each attack. When it came, he struck. He spun the staff in a tight arc, knocking one blade aside and stepping in close. The other end of the staff slammed into the champion's chest, sending him staggering back. The crowd roared, but the fight wasn't over. The champion recovered quickly, fury in his eyes. He charged again, his blades flashing. Daniel ducked under the swing, pivoted, and drove the staff into the back of the champion's knee. The alien dropped to one leg, and Daniel followed with a sharp strike to his shoulder. The champion hit the ground, his blades deactivating. Daniel stepped back, breathing hard, the plasma staff still in his grip. The courtyard was silent for a moment, then cheers erupted. The king's expression was unreadable, but his voice was clear. "You have skill. Enough to win. Enough to live here without shame." Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line. Vera's smirk was gone. Seleni's gaze lingered on Daniel for a long moment before she looked away. As Daniel left the courtyard, he knew this victory had done more than prove his worth. It had shifted the way the court saw him. He was no longer just the human who had been mocked by the king's daughters. He was someone the palace had to take seriously, and that, he knew, would only make the game ahead even more dangerous. The victory in the courtyard spread through the palace like fire through dry grass. Servants whispered it in the corridors. Guards spoke of it with grudging respect. Even the nobles, who had looked at Daniel with contempt days earlier, now studied him with wary eyes. But victory had its cost. Daniel knew the champion he defeated would not be the last to test him. In the palace, strength was both a shield and a target. That evening, the king summoned him to the great hall. The sisters were already there, standing at the base of the throne. Lyra's arms were folded, her eyes cool but no longer mocking. Selene stood straight, her silver gaze locked on him. Vera's golden eyes followed his every step, her expression unreadable. The king's voice filled the hall. "Daniel Rains, you have stood before my council. You have fought my warrior. You have survived in a place where others would have fallen. Now I will decide your fate." The room was silent. Daniel stood tall, meeting the king's gaze. "When I brought you here, my daughters saw you as weak. They mocked you. I gave them an order to live with you, to learn from you, to see if there was more to a human than they believed." The king paused, his eyes sweeping the hall. "Now they have seen." Lyra stepped forward first. "I thought you were nothing but stubborn pride. But you fight with your mind as much as your body. You don't waste your strength." Her tone was not warm, but it carried a hint of respect. Selene followed. "You do not bow to insults. You listen before you strike. That is rare here." Finally Vera approached. For a long moment she said nothing, just stared at him. Then quietly she spoke. "You don't break. Not in the ring, not in the council, not even when surrounded by enemies. I respect that." The king nodded slowly. "You have earned their respect. That is more valuable than fear. Now my decree will be fulfilled." Daniel kept his face calm, though his heart beat harder. "One of my daughters will take you as her bonded partner," the king said. "Not as punishment, not as charity, but as an alliance between human and Zirean. Which of you will it be?" The sisters looked at each other. Lyra's gaze was sharp but considering. Selene tilted her head slightly, as if weighing the choice. Vera's eyes held a strange light. It was Selene who stepped forward. "I will." The king's eyebrows rose slightly. "You are certain?" "Yes," Selene said, her voice steady. "If he can survive this court, he can stand beside me in anything." Daniel met her eyes, searching for the hidden reason. But what he saw there wasn't mockery, it was challenge, and something else he couldn't name. The king stood. "So be it. From this day, Daniel Rains is no longer a guest in my court. He is blood by bond. Harm him, and you defy me." The hall filled with the sound of voices, some shocked, some angry, some merely stunned. Daniel remained still, but inside he felt the shift. He was no longer a prisoner or a piece in someone else's game. He was now part of the royal house. After the hall emptied, Selene walked with him toward the balcony overlooking the city. The wind carried the scent of strange flowers and distant rain. "You know this changes nothing," she said quietly. "You will still have enemies here." Daniel looked out at the glowing skyline. "Good. I work better when I know who's against me." She smiled faintly, not with the amusement of their first meeting, but with the recognition of an equal. "Then perhaps you'll fit here after all." Far below, the city moved on, unaware that a single human had just changed the balance of power in the Zirean court forever.